You're listening to The Nourished Child, episode number 97. I'm your host, Jill Castle. Do you have a child who tests the limits, acts out, has a strong will? Do you feel like you're always embattled with your child, trying to get cooperation? I had a child like this, and it was a few years before I found a word that described her, that I also felt honored her temperament and didn't describe her negatively. You've met this child of mine before, back on episode number 47. And when she was little, I called her Spirited. And after finding over 20 years ago, Mary Sheedy Kurchinka's book, Raising Your Spirited Child, a guide for parents whose child is more intense, sensitive, perceptive, persistent, and energetic, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. I felt like there was a name and a resource for what I was dealing with. The book completely resonated with me and what I was dealing with on the daily. And what I want to say to you is this: my spirited firstborn was a hard introduction to parenting for me. If you've listened to my TEDx talk, you know I struggled with feeding her, but I also struggled with managing her in other situations too. Understanding her, however, made things easier for me. Working with her, rather than imposing my quote-unquote way, helped us both. So, interestingly and maybe funnily, we had an adult conversation recently. She was feeling what I think many college graduates feel, and that's the hardness of making that transition into adulthood. I reflected to her sort of jokingly that change is hard, and that she especially needs a lot of warm-up time to accept new changes, and that transitions haven't always been easy for her. In fact, I said, change has always been a struggle for you. You're like me. It's a struggle for me too. And especially if it's a change you're not expecting. And it was like the light bulb went off for her. She was like, yeah, change is hard for me. And so I think, we all do well by our children when we partner with them and truly try to understand who they are and what makes them tick. That's why in all my programs, my entire approach, the Nourished Child Path, the Nourished Child Approach, the workshops, everything is based in what to feed kids, how to do it, and why they behave the way they do. The why they behave the way they do, either because of their developmental stage or their overall temperament or the situation that they're in, is enormously important to the success of feeding your kids and parenting them. So to this end, I'm bringing on Kelly Meyer. She is the creator of the website Respectful Parent. Kelly is a mom, a certified parent effectiveness training instructor, and a parent coach in San Diego, California. She helps parents find the balance in parenting through her site, Respectful Parent. Through her training in the philosophy of respectful parenting, founded by Magda Gerber, Kelly was able to see her children in a new way and became fascinated with watching them grow. It was on this path that she eventually found and became certified in parent effectiveness training and continued to learn how to raise children who not only trust her, but whom she also trusts. Now, she uses her knack for relating to even the strongest of wills to see all children as capable, whole people, and in turn guides their parents to begin to see them in a less challenging way. She's found her passion and her purpose in teaching others how to raise thoughtful, self-aware, and independent people. You can find today's show notes over at jillcastle.com/097. That's 097 for episode number 97. So now you know what we're going to do. We are going to cue the music.
Welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Nourished Child. This is a podcast about childhood nutrition, feeding kids and dealing with the ups and downs of raising them. If you're new here, A big welcome to you. I'm glad you found this show. If you're a returning listener, I really appreciate your loyalty. So I'm recording this on a November morning, and I live in Connecticut, and it is cold outside. The temperature today is in the low 20s, and it has completely foibled my run for the day. I have a rule. I don't run outside if it's below 30 degrees. So I am, after this recording, going to readjust my exercise plans for the day. This week, I actually opened up and hosted a live workshop for parents called Eat in Peace. And the topic of that workshop was on getting family meals in place and more particularly adopting family style meals. It ended up being a great workshop, had a lot of great turnout. And while I do think every family should be using this approach, and I basically take you through why you should use it, how to get it started, from what to feed your children and effective, fast ways to get dinner on the table, how to be a positive feeder, and my step-by-step approach to getting family-style meals started, how to navigate them when you have big eaters or picky eaters or very young children, and also how to connect around the table, what to say, what not to say. And I give everyone who attended the workshop a challenge. And that was a challenge to go through a process with me. So I hope that you have some interest in this workshop. It was jam-packed. It has tons of information, a PDF guide to help you follow along, reflect, and learn. If you weren't able to make it to the live workshop, the recording will be available and for sale over on my nutrition school platform. You can go to www.nutritionprepschool.com. That's all one word, Nutrition Prep School. And you can learn more about family style meals, the workshop, and you can register there. You'll basically get access to the platform and that course, which is about 2 hours, and you'll have access to the PDF as well. So I hope you check that out. I don't have a mailbag today, but I do have some updates to share with you in the nutrition world. Number one, there was a new report that came out on appropriate beverages for young children. I'm going to be diving into this topic deeper in the future with an interview of a member of the panel who created these recommendations. But just to give you a quick little summary, these recommendations are for children birth through age 5. And essentially, the impetus behind these recommendations is to get healthy beverages on board for children early on. Because what your child drinks really does matter. It can be a source of nutrition, a good source of nutrition, or it can be a source of not so good nutrition. So it breaks down like this, just a quickie. From birth to age 1, all babies should be drinking either breast milk or infant formula. From age 1 to age 5, pretty much it's milk, water, or small amounts of 100% juice. For example, a 2 to 3-year-old is recommended to have a maximum of a half a cup of 100% juice per day. And a 4 to 5-year-old is recommended to have up to maximum 3/4 cup of 100% juice per day. So update your daycare facilities, your preschools, your babysitters, your grandparents. These are interesting recommendations. They're pretty simple. It's pretty much water, milk, or 100% juice for children ages 1 to 5. Again, I'll be diving deeper into this topic in the future in 2020, early 2020, so that we can really sort of interview those who were on the committee and set these recommendations. I'm hoping to share with you the impetus behind it, some of the research that they are using to develop these guidelines, and just have a better knowledge of why these are in place and where they came from. So I'm hoping to share that with you. Second issue is toddler food, particularly packaged food and toddler drinks. I shared an article from the Washington Post on the Nourished Child Facebook page. And by the way, if you're not a fan, you can head over on Facebook and like that page, The Nourished Child. But the title of the article was Sweet how the baby food industry hooks toddlers with sugar, salt, and fat. And it was an interesting article. I posted it over there. It got mixed reviews. Some people were offended by the idea that toddler milks were coming under fire. I didn't post the article to be controversial one way or the other, but I do think as informed consumer, we need to know what's out there for our children and understand things that are helpful and even things that are perhaps not useful for young children. So, as I mentioned in this article, they reviewed the consensus recommendations about what young children should be drinking, which I just reviewed with you. But to clarify, flavored or plant-based milks and caffeinated beverages and sodas were excluded from the list of acceptable drinks for children under the age of 5. Again, I'll dive into that deeper in a subsequent episode. But what this article really wanted to highlight was that there has been a boom in unhealthy foods and beverages for children ages 6 months to 3 years old. And they're packaged for convenience with promises of making young children stronger and smarter. Mintel, which is a survey organization, reported that there were 4 times more product launches in the baby and toddler food aisle in 2018 than there were in 2005. And a huge surge occurred in the new toddler foods and drinks area, particularly foods and drinks that are containing high amounts of sugar. So one of the things that they quoted, and I want to just read this quote in the article because, of course, my thing is one of the things that I always assure my parents that I work with, and I hope that you've received this assurance too, is that, you're doing the best that you can do with the information that you have. And let's be real here. We don't do a good job of preparing parents in our country with the information they need early on and often enough. So this quote said, "And there's been little nutritional guidance for new parents who glean what they can from parenting chat rooms, family lore, and pediatricians, many of whom had only a single class on nutrition during medical school." So folks, you know how I feel about this. We need to be doing a better job on educating parents early and often. And by the by, I am updating the Nourish Child Project. I'm actually going to change the name to the Nourish Child Blueprint. That course will be sort of my hallmark course of the basic fundamental information you need to have in order to raise a healthy child, from what to feed your children, how to do it, and why they behave the way they do, or child development guidelines. That's the biggest revamp of that course, will be the child development module, because where a kid is in their development and what their temperament is like definitely influences how well they eat, what they choose to eat, how they develop their food preferences, and so on. But I digress a little bit, but I just wanted to let you know that that course is going to be updated. If you're already a student in the Nourish Child Project, you will get an automatic upgrade to the new version, the Nourish Child Blueprint. And my hope for any of you out there that have some connection with healthcare, hospitals, insurance companies, my hope is that this is a course that can be offered to parents early on in their journey. And boy, wouldn't it be nice if it was part of your insurance package, that you actually got this education right off the bat. So if any of you are movers and shakers out there and you know somebody who can help me get this into insurance companies or even birthing hospitals, children's hospitals, this would be so helpful for families to have this education early on. Back to the Washington Post article, 29% of toddlers' calories are coming from snacks, most of which are salty or sweetened processed foods, not fruits and vegetables. So to help you with better toddler snacks, I'm going to be including that link to the toddler snack episode that I did a few episodes ago so that you can go and listen in on that. But I also have a free download called 51 snack ideas for kids. Grab that. It's a free download. It's just a big printable list. You can look at it with your child, get new inspiration for new ideas for snacks. They are real food snacks. They are healthy snacks, and they are, I think, somewhat convenient. I'm not asking you to cook anything. They're definitely combinations you can pull from the fridge or the pantry. So anyways, the article, just to wrap up, goes on to say toddler snacks are often positioned as healthier than adults. Jennifer Harris, who's a researcher on toddler drinks and toddler snacks, says, "We didn't find it to be the case in terms of added sugar, sodium, saturated fat, and calories." She says, "You wouldn't give your toddler Cheetos, but you would give them Gerber Puffs, which are basically the same thing." Ouch. I'm also going to include a link to sugar, how to cut down sugar in your child's diet if you're feeling like it's too much. And I'm not talking about lactose, which is milk sugar, and I'm not talking about fructose, which is fruit sugar. Those are natural forms of sugar. I'm talking about added sugar, the white stuff, the stuff we put in our cookie mix and our coffee. So my article just gives you, I think, 25 different ways that you can cut down on added sugar in your diets. I'll include that link in the post. And I will also include another link, which is titled, "When Can Babies Eat Sweets?" So those will all be in the show notes. You can check them out there. So let's get on to the show. I've kept your attention long enough. You are in for a big treat. Here's Kelly Meyer. She's talking about parent effectiveness training. And again, she is from the website Respectful Parent. Here's Kelly. Welcome to the Nourished Child podcast, Kelly.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
It's nice to have you on the show. We've kind of circled in the same circles, and this is the first time I think we've both overlapped at the same point.
Yes, we have many mutual people.
Yeah, and you are a parenting expert, and I'm delighted to have you on the show today to talk about, how we can navigate some of those tricky situations related to food and eating using a really positive parenting technique, which is called parent effectiveness training. So before we dig into what that is, I'd like you to tell everybody who you are and a little bit about yourself, how you got into all of this.
Well, I have an unusual path, but I used to be a sales trainer, which for 12 years. And then when I had kids, I worked for a special event company, and that didn't jive with children because it was lots of nights, lots of weekends. And then I discovered that I had one really strong-willed child who didn't respond to, mainstream parenting of these are the rules and this is what we're going to do. And he was like, that's not happening. So I'm sure lots of people have that. But I started researching, and I found RIE, which stands for Resources for Infant Educators, Janet Lansbury's site. And I found her when she had like 2,000 or 3,000 people. Now she has like hundreds of thousands. I found her when she was fairly small, and I got lots of one-on-one help from her. So she helped launch me a little bit. And then her friend and also one of my mentors, Lisa Sunbury Gerber, they started a group. Actually, I think I was one of like the first 18 members of the group. I've since left it, but they encouraged me. They thought I had a gift for relating to children. And so as my kid, RIE only goes up to age 2. I mean, you can still use the principles for a long time, but I needed a few more things with my little guy. By that time I had a daughter too, and it was a rough transition. And they encouraged me to seek something out. So I found parent effectiveness training, or PET as I'll refer to it from now on. And so I did that, and it was literally the only thing that helped my child understand what I was trying to tell him, because it included him in the solutions. It helped him understand. And so I got certified. I started teaching. I got my legs doing that. And then I do some online book clubs. I do a subscription group now that is really fun. So I've just kind of keep adding things as I can handle them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And how old is your son now?
He is 10 and my daughter is 7.
Well, you're entering into kind of the middle school years and all the new stuff that goes with that, the budding independence and opinions and all that good stuff. So parent effectiveness training, PET, is a way to parent your child which includes him or her in the solution.
Right.
Is that a fair way to describe it?
Yes. So it basically has a really solid framework. So anyone can do it once they understand the skills, but it basically teaches that all behavior meets a need. So it's needs-based parenting, which is very, very respectful. So you want to understand what a child's behavior is telling you and interpret it so they can come up with their own solution, so that you're always helping them towards independence. It's a lifelong process, not an immediate goal, just like with eating. So it's always something that you're working towards to understand. So it becomes a lifestyle instead of, I'm the parent, I have all the answers, because sometimes you don't. Your child knows themselves best, is what they believe.
What are some of the other underpinnings of the philosophy? Your child knows himself best.
Right. So all behavior meets a need is the main thing. So everyone matters. So we have 3 different types of parenting that they talk about. And there's authoritarian, which is the parent imposes a solution on the child. And then there's more permissive, where the child gets his way more often. And then he calls it democratic, where we think of maybe your child is doing something that you don't like, but what you try and understand is, why are they doing it? And how can we meet that need in a different way that still works for you and works for me? So there's much less conflict that way.
So that reminds me of, feeding. Feeding and parenting are closely aligned in terms of the style that you use. And we have authoritarian feeding, which now is called controlling feeding. We have what used to be called permissive, is now called indulgent feeding. Same principles, controlling is my way or the highway. You do what I tell you to do. Indulgent feeding is, the child is setting the preferences, the selections of the food, the menu, child in charge, I guess. And then diplomatic, which is a lot like democratic feeding, where it's, your goals as a authoritative or diplomatic feeder is to instill structure, boundaries, and reasonable choice, with the goal of building autonomy along the way.
Right.
It sounds very aligned.
Yes, it is, which is, yes, I think why we travel in the same circles.
Yes. So all behavior meets a need. Can you give us some examples of what that looks like?
Sure. So you behave in a certain way because you have some sort of need. So when I talk about needs, I remember back when you learned about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that triangle with all the levels.
Yeah.
So you've got hunger and basic needs, and then you've got safety and connection and love and belonging and all these different levels. And at the top, you have your peak experiences, so self-actualization. So all behavior is going to meet some of these needs. So maybe you have a child that is constantly testing boundaries or constantly doing something. So my child wanted to play his video games all the time. And I began to understand that it wasn't, a lot of people right now, okay, I'm addicted. He's addicted to screens. What am I going to do? No screen time, cut it off. So I started playing with him a little bit and to understand what he liked about it. And I began to realize that we go to a school that's not in our neighborhood and we have to drive there. So he never gets play dates with his school friends. So this was a way for him to connect with some of his friends at school and be social. So he was feeling a social need there. So we were able to talk about this. And once I realized, it was okay, we'll set up a few more play dates so that you can have these friendships that are a little bit more present. And so then screen time decreased a little bit because he wasn't trying so hard to maintain the friendships in that way. So we found another way.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Right.
So, and was your child really open about why he wanted to play, or was that sort of an evolving conversation?
He was raised this way. So yes, he knows problem solving. He goes, Mom, you're not getting my need. Like, he has the lingo down. He knows what to do at 10 now.
Yeah.
But so if you can't get it though, so the skill we use to use that is called active listening. So, and that's very therapeutic. It's what most therapists use when they're trying to understand a patient, but you listen to them and you want to listen for the need and you reflect back and that's how you try and get the need. And so you do that a little bit and you're like, okay, so what you like about that. And if you can't do that, if you're not skilled in active listening, because it is a skill, it takes time to learn this, but you can sometimes just say, okay, so what is this doing for you? How is this helping you? And sometimes that helps them. Well, I get to talk to my friends and that kind of shortcuts it in a way. I'm like, okay, so you you want to play with your friends. It's not so much the video game. Yeah, I never get to see them because they live far away and you won't take me there. Okay, so you wish I would take you to see your friends more. Yes. Okay, I didn't understand that. Now I do. So that builds self-awareness for them on some of the behaviors that they're doing that may not be so healthy, but they're also meeting a need. So now we can identify the need and they can do it a different way.
Right, right. And so for him, the need was socialization.
Right. Connection, friendships. Right.
Mm-hmm. And so as the parent, your job is to take that information and transition it to come with a solution with your child to figure out a new norm.
Right. And instead of imposing the solution on him, he gets to impose it on himself because the ideas that you think of yourself are going to work for you. It's like when you find out someone's hungry and you say, well, here's a bowl of pasta and they are allergic to gluten. That's not a solution that's going to work for them. They have to decide what they want to eat, right? In a certain way. So if he thinks of the solution himself, he's much more likely to stick to it because it's his idea. And so that builds independence again. It builds self-awareness. So when we're talking through this, he's talking out his problems out loud and becoming more self-aware.
And so if you have a child that regularly tests limits or acts out, what is that a sign of? What need, I guess, is most common in your opinion when you have a child that's doing that?
I mean, again, all behavior is a communication. So you want to find out, what are they trying to tell me? You want to be curious, not furious, right? So you don't want to start from the point of view, like, this child is trying to annoy me. Children are born wanting to be part of something, wanting to help, wanting to know what is expected of them. So the more information you can give them in a very clear way on how things impact you, the more chances they have to be successful intentionally out of consideration rather than fear. Because a lot of times we try and get children to behave using punishments, which creates fear. And fear is like, now you've put them down the rung on the safety. So now they're at lower level needs because they're afraid and they can't function. So then you're expecting them to function and they can't because they're afraid. So it's this paradox. But a child that's testing needs more clear information. And so you will tell them, hey, a common one is cleaning up or getting out of the house when there's toys all over. So you want to really describe what you see. So the room is messy. They look around and everything is where they think it should be. Like, they know exactly where everything is.
This applies to dads and men too, right?
Yes.
I'm just joking.
Absolutely. To anyone.
It can be women too.
Right. So there's
daughters.
Also leadership effectiveness training too. So, and it's all based on the same model. So the first thing that you want to ask is, who owns the problem? So testing behavior indicates to me that the child has some kind of problem. They own it. So we want to let them own the problem instead of fixing or making the problem worse. So that's the first thing. Okay, so when the child owns a problem, I use this tool, which is active listening. You listen to them so that you're not owning the problem for them, which allows them to solve it themselves. And this requires you to see your child as a separate person, not an extension of you, a child who is capable. So the viewpoint is always capability, independence. They can do this. I have my own mentor that helps me sometimes when things get tricky over here. And sometimes when I get stuck in the he can't or she can't, she goes, I wonder why you think he can't. And that always snaps me out of it.
Mm-hmm.
When I own the problem, I send my own message, but I send it in a very specific way. So I want to talk about the exact behavior that I'm seeing. The room isn't messy. There are toys on the floor. Your clothes are on the chairs and your bed's not made, whatever it is. So now they know exactly what I mean and they can do something about it. And then I want to say how it affects me. So, hey, the laundry is all over the floor. I'm trying to do laundry. I can't find which ones are clean and I don't want to do wash clean clothes twice. Now they know how it impacts me. So then I tell them how I feel about that impact. It's tiring for me. It's exhausting. It's frustrating. So you attach feelings to it, but the feelings are attached to the effect. So they know how the effect, not the child, because you don't want them to feel blamed for your feelings because we own our own feelings. So there's a lot of depth to this. But I would say, hey, when there's toys on the floor, I worry I'm going to trip and fall when I walk through. There's a puddle in the bathroom floor. I don't want to slip in it. I sprained my ankle once doing that. I don't want that to happen again. So you're just saying it in a very matter-of-fact way. Now, for some children who need clear boundaries and are what people generally call the limit testers, sometimes you have to be very, very congruent with your body language so that it matches your words. Does that make
Like
sense?
how?
So
Yeah, it makes sense to me, but like, can you give us an example of how like the body language would match your words?
a really clear example would be a child that doesn't want to go to bed. And you tell them, I'm too tired to chase you, but you're chasing them around. Your body language doesn't say, I'm tired. You're running
This is a game.
around. Right.
Yeah.
So you want to handle that a different way so that you're like maybe blocking them. You're not chasing them around. I don't want to chase you. I'm tired. And this is making me more tired. And so maybe you block the door a little bit. So they're like, whoa, she's really serious. So those more strong-willed kids that are constant limit testing, all the messages match.
I'm thinking of my, one of my children she's in her 20s now. So this was 2 decades ago. And I'm not sure when parent effectiveness training came out. But,
1965 or 9. Oh, it's been out a long time. Revised a lot, but a long time.
Okay. So at the time, I just remember, really feeling pretty inadequate in terms of parenting her because, spirited kids can be pretty demanding. And when we had more children, I have 4 and she was the oldest. I remember just, it was a lot. It was a lot to parent her. And then also the feelings of guilt, like I've got these 3 other kids that need time and attention and, parenting also. And we just discovered over time that, she really needed to be part of the solution. That was really what worked for her. She really needed to be included in the conversation. She needed to be part of the solution. The solution wasn't always going to end up the way she wanted it to end up, but she needed to be heard.
Right.
She also needed a lot of preparation for changes and transitions. Anything abrupt and all of a sudden something she didn't know about, that was never going to go over well.
Right. I have a son like that too. Anytime you tell him something that's a surprise, he'll say, nope. And then I just say, okay, let's think about it for a few minutes. And then he'll go, fine, I'll do it. 5 minutes later. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they just need that sort of
processing time. Yeah.
Yeah. Processing. Some parents out there might be thinking, this is a lot of work. It is a lot of work to parent well, I think.
It is. It is a lot of work. But the reward is, and so the whole point of PET is to develop relationships. It's relationship-based parenting. And you want children that grow up to trust you, who you also trust. And it prevents the sneaking around. It prevents all of these rebellions. So Thomas Gordon, who wrote it, in one of the quotes is, kids don't rebel against their parents. They rebel against their parents' use of power. So if you're taking that out of the equation, you have children that trust you. And my son, he tells me everything. And we have saved him from a couple really scary situations because he was able to tell me some things that were going on that were, really not okay. And he said, Mom, something is happening that's making me really uncomfortable. And I don't know what to do. And they were red flag type of things. And I don't know if I would have known about those ever. And we prevented some pretty powerful things from happening to him.
So let me ask you this, because you run the website Respectful Parent and you coach parents as well, right? You do education, you do private coaching. Is PET really gauged towards the younger children, the toddlers, middle schoolers, or is that something that's working with teenagers as well?
Oh, it really works really well with teenagers because you can teach them the skills. They can learn it. They also have a youth effectiveness training program that is geared solely towards teens. The goal is always independence. How can I communicate so that my child is more independent? Because setting limits and doing all this stuff helps them behave, but it doesn't help them limit themselves. And that's the goal, is you want them to be able to limit themselves. And so with teenagers, you want to have a teenager that you trust. And so involving them is definitely helpful. Then they aren't as inclined to rebel. That's kind of the signature of teenagers is rebellion. And he's flipping that on its head and saying it doesn't have to be that way. And
it's all through communication and involving that teen in the solution and being clear, obviously, with expectations, would you say? Or?
Right. And you send those through the iMessages. So one of the things that he said that really took me a while to embrace fully or understand fully was that children don't need limits. Limits are a way of delivering limitations, but you can also give them the information in a way they can understand. So you don't have to do that, because sometimes when you set limits, you get a power struggle. And so that's one of the ways to avoid that, is to give them more information. I always use the example when I teach classes. Has anyone ever told their children they're on their phone and they don't be quiet and nothing happens?
Yeah.
And you say, I'm on the phone.
Right, and they get louder.
And you get louder and louder and louder, and they don't do anything because you're stating the obvious. They know you're on the phone. They just don't know what they want you to do. Those connections aren't quite built yet. So when you say, hey, when you're screaming this loud, I can't hear grandma on the other end of the line. And now they have enough information like, oh, that's what she wants.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were to tell a coworker, like, hey, I'm doing a podcast right now, and you guys are, you just say, hey, I'm on the phone, and they go, oh, sorry, and they move away. They know what to do. Children, not so much.
Right. You need to be more clear with them.
Lots of clarity. Yeah.
Let's talk about food and eating and just the environment around food and eating in a home. How can you apply PET to that environment? Like, I'm thinking, should there be food rules or not food rules?
We have food rules. Should there be
expectations? Yeah,
we have food rules. So while this is a very democratic, it's not, as a lot of people think, that it's just kind of way out there on the spectrum of parenting. And I guess it is, which makes me sad. But we do have rules, but we make them together. So I have one picky eater and one that will eat almost anything. What we started is like, hey, food's kind of becoming an issue. Dinners are getting harder. You're not liking a lot of the foods. And I know about DOR from Marianne and Ellen Satter and all the people that do DOR. We made together a list of all the things that they like. And we literally have it hanging in the kitchen. And so when I'm on my game, so I'm not always on my A game, I remember to meal plan with them. So we'll sit down and go through like the meals that they like, and we'll plan it out. And if there's something that they, I really want and they don't, then I make sure that we have something that is equally nutritious that they also really like available. So that's what we do. And we have decided, okay, we problem solved meal times, the actual time of day, because they were eating huge snacks when they got home from school. So you have to look at the whole day. What's going on in the whole day that's causing these problems at dinner? So I was able to find a few things like, okay, my son doesn't like these certain things that he liked to eat lunch at school, his hot lunch. But I figured out 2 days a week, he didn't like the protein they were serving, so he wasn't eating it. So again, I had to do a lot of listening, but also like, what can we do to solve this? He's like, well, you could send me some food so we decided Wednesdays were his lunch from home days. So he's involved in this. But then we figured out certain days, if they're going to eat a big snack, like, okay, you guys are really hungry today. So that means we're all going to have a snack now, and we'll eat dinner a little bit later so that we still are all together, but they're not full when they're sitting down because they had a huge snack because they didn't eat lunch at school. So that kind of thing. So you want to look at the whole day, the routines, all of this kind of thing.
Yeah, right. And apply it to food and eating as well to help you problem solve. Well, some parents can be too controlling around food and eating, and that goes back to that authoritarian parenting or the controlling feeding style. How do you see, in your experience, how do you see this playing out in the dynamic between the parent and the child, and what would be a better approach?
Right. I mean, resistance, really. So and we have the same rule that I think I've read about with you guys, is no food is bad food. There's just, you don't want to demonize any kind of food. I did have this happen, and someone asked me for advice. Like, my child is stealing. The conversation was, my child is starting to steal. The child was 5 or 6. And I didn't know at first. So I did a little digging, and they're stealing from the store. And we've told him that stealing isn't okay. We make him return it, and he's still stealing. So I paused and I said, what is he stealing? Sweets, candy. And I said, okay, what are your rules around candy? Well, we don't allow it. Okay, so your child is feeling deprived. And so my quote that I say is, deprivation leads to desperation. And so this child was desperate. And so I suggested, let's revisit this with him. And the child says, yeah, you never let me have it, so I'm trying to get it. And so there was the problem. He's not, they had all in their brain, he was immoral, he was stealing, and it's like, okay, no, it's usually
how did this happen?
Right.
We didn't raise you
Catastrophizing
this way.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like he's on a path to, we make these problems seem so huge sometimes. And I said, maybe you need to revisit those rules. He's a little bit older. He sees his kids' friends getting it. And I'm sure there's a way that he can have a little bit more control over his life that's still not super unhealthy.
That's a good example. And then you also said resistance when parents are too controlling. What do you mean by that?
Refusing to eat. There's two functions that you cannot control, literally cannot control another person. That's swallowing food and going to the bathroom. So the more control there are around those things, the more resistance you're going to get. So
I hope all the parents listening out there heard that.
Right. Children will potty train. You don't have to. Yeah. But that's a whole different podcast, right?
Yes.
But
yeah, no, it's so true. The more you control, the more resistance, fights, standoffs.
Right.
Or even just, again, I think it depends on the temperament of the kid. If you have a child who's a real pleaser and easygoing, they'll comply.
They will. And so that works short term.
Wonder,
But then they're ending up stuffing their feelings, and they're feeling like they can't voice their true thoughts and feelings to their parents because they'll be ignored. And we want children that feel important. So we want to value them and also show them that they can solve their own problems if they put in a little thinking and work and communication.
But you don't want to give up parenting. Like you're parenting,
right?
But you're parenting with the child and the goal of autonomy and independence and cooperation and problem solving and solutions as a co-opted end result.
Right. No, you're still parenting. It's you're not saying, okay, eat whatever you want. So they talk about in who owns the problem. So if a child's not eating, they own a problem. You own a problem because they're not eating what you made. And you either have to cook more, you have to let the child starve. You both own a problem here. So if you can solve it together, then fine. My goal in meal planning with them, understanding what foods they like, is preventative. So we don't have those power struggles when we sit down. But if we do, occasionally there are guests that come over that try and get my children to eat by offering them treats. I'll give you 2 M&Ms if you take 2 bites of broccoli, that kind of thing. I want you to be something unhealthy. If you eat something healthy, like you can enjoy healthy food just as much as you can enjoy an M&M. But exposure, like we are talking about, is a lot of times just being exposed and seeing the food is a step. So involving them in the cooking, all of that kind of stuff is something that will help them in the long term. But we talk about the no problem area. So we have the parent owns a problem, the child owns a problem, and then when we both own a problem, but then there's also this part, there's a visual, I'll send it to you, but there's a part where there's no problem. And that's where you talk about your values. So when everything's calm, you talk about why healthy eating is important to you. And you talk about why maybe it's not great to eat right before bed. And you share those things.
So you're not doing it when it's a problem. You're doing it
right
in a neutral time.
Right. I mean, I may still bring it up when it's a problem, but when they're going to understand you is when they're really open to hearing you.
I think one of the things that really comes through for me is having the child be part of the solution. So when we think about food and eating challenges, let's run through a couple of things in terms of helping parents understand how they could apply these principles to some of the common things. We talked about eating too many sweets and, a child feeling restricted and sort of becoming desperate with, sweets, which he was not able to have. But what if it's a child who's eating too many sweets and it's just, it's not coming from deprivation. It's coming from, I really like this. It's available. Is that the child's problem or is that the parent's problem?
Both, because there's a responsibility factor here, right? Even if it doesn't affect me at all, I still am responsible for giving my child the information that he needs to be a successful person, adult, right? I'm raising adults, really, not children. So I want to give them like, okay, you really, really like these. These are like your favorite food ever. And also you like some other foods. And so what are we going to eat all day? If you eat this all day, You're not going to get these other foods. But also, I'd like to share with you some information about this food. And let's think about how your body feels after you eat a lot of it. It's like one time my son had a huge pack of Starbursts. We were on a flight. I don't know where he got it. I think my husband might have given it to him to keep him quiet. But then he threw up because he's on the plane and it was, and so he was like, oh, I see what you mean. Too much is too much. So you can let them have some of those experiences, but when you get a child that's really, really stuck in that behavior, that's really hard because you tend to I don't want him to be like this forever, and you really stick onto it. But you give them the information. You say, let's learn a little bit about sweets and how they affect you when you have it. How do you feel? Okay. And I did this with my daughter. She was always wanting a snack right before bedtime, or she was wanting sweets right before bedtime. So I said, let's throughout the day see how your body feels. And so we did that. And she's like, I feel really good right now. And okay, so you just ate ice cream. How do you feel? And she's like, I don't really feel full. I said, okay, so maybe that's telling us something. And she on her own, and she's 7, she said the other night, I'm not going to ask for a snack tonight. I know that doesn't make me sleep good. Because I was telling her, when you eat really close to bedtime, it sends your body the signal that, and the other night it was funny. She goes, I really want a snack. And I said, yeah. And she goes, but my body says I'm not really hungry. I just kind of want to eat for fun. So I'm not going to do it. And I was blown away. I couldn't believe it, but it's working.
That's great insight.
Right.
I mean, that's great. Just self-awareness.
Right. And then I have another funny story about her because she's the one that will eat anything. She's like, Mama, I love food. But she likes she'll eat. I could put a whole head of broccoli and steam it and she would eat the entire thing just as much as she hasn't been a problem. She doesn't overeat, but she'll eat anything. But one time, here's an example a lot of parents get stuck in is the cookie tantrum. Do you know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. I want a cookie. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So she came in, this was a couple of years ago, but it's just, I love the story. She goes into the cupboard and I said, what are you doing? She goes, I'm going to get a cookie. And I said, well, I'm making dinner right now. She goes, I need the cookie. And I said, Hannah, if you have the cookie now, I'm worried you'll ruin your dinner. And then I'm making it for no reason. And she fell on the floor, kicking and screaming. I was like, whoa, she hadn't done that in a few years. So I paused and I was like, okay, she owns a problem, right? So I listened and I said, something's really going on with this cookie. You really, really want it. And you're super mad at me. And she goes, yes. And I said, so what's going on? She goes, well, I'll never get it. I said, I was kind of thrown for a loop. And I said, so if you think, I'm trying to just give the information that I'm hearing. If you think if you don't get it now, you'll never get it. And she goes, yes. You're cooking dinner. That means Dad's almost going to be home. And when we have cookies, Dad always eats them when he gets home, and there's only one left. So I was like, okay, well, you have a point. So I said, you have a point. And I still am concerned that if you eat it now, you're not going to eat dinner. And so she thinks for a minute, because she trusts me, right? She's been doing this for a long time. She thinks for a minute. Mm-hmm. She goes, I know. I'm going to hide it. And she puts it in the freezer and runs off. No problem. So, and she eats dinner and it's fine. But it just took a minute for me to understand, what is this behavior telling me?
What was her need?
Exactly. Yeah. And so the cookie tantrum was over. And so I think a lot of times we think it's about a certain thing that it's not actually about. It's not always about the food. So anytime there's a child that's fixated on a food, why? That's a symptom of something. And that's our job to kind of be detectives and figure it out.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good piece of advice. I say that oftentimes when I'm, working with families or just processing information that I've heard about. And oftentimes it's not about the food. There's something else going on. It's, and if there's a problem, it's oftentimes, food is part of the problem, but it's not the whole problem. And a lot of times people think it is the whole problem.
Right.
It's nope, there's a lot of other stuff going on there.
And I notice food is a lot of times attached to feeling special. Well, I would feel special if I got to have this because it's a treat. And, food a lot of times is a community event and it's special and connection. There's a lot of connection built into food. But there have been times when well, why do you want this chocolate so much? Because it would make me feel special. I had a hard day. Okay. What else would make you feel special? so that we're like, I'm worried that if you're always going to eat when you don't feel special, we won't be able to feel special together. And I would like to help you when you have a hard day. There's all different things that you can use food to do.
So, what are some of the most inspiring transformations you've seen in families as a result of using the PET approach?
So I would say the most profound one was I had a mom that came to me and she was just in tears, and she thought her son had autism. She thought he had no empathy, all of this. And she learned how to listen to him. I was really gentle with her, but she was so scared that he wasn't developing the way that she was expecting him to, that she had stopped listening to him. She had stopped giving him empathy because she was trying so much to get him to do these things that showed he had empathy. And so once she learned how to listen to him, she was like, Kelly, he's doing so much better at school. He's telling me when he has problems. I understand what he's thinking. He comes to me and I just tears, such a profound impact. She was a really successful lady, very, just a very powerful woman. And it was really hard for her to have that shift to see that he could do it.
She needed to see him in a different way and use a different approach.
Right.
It sounds like.
And I had another woman like that she wanted more peace in her home, and she came to class and she said there's so much more harmony. Her children are fighting less. She enjoys them more. That's really the goal, right? Is we have children not so that we can order them around, but we have them because we want joy. Children can bring a lot of joy, but we get stuck in this overwhelming feeling that we need to control them, to have them be responsible. And that disables them from being able to be considerate of us because there's a power struggle. But she came and she said, gosh, my son is she thought he was completely she said, he's not self-aware. He's never been self-aware. He has no idea. She was really funny and just very abrupt. And I just said, not yet. And by the end of the class, I teach is 8 weeks for the full course. And by the end of the class, she was just like, I can't believe it. He problem solves with me. He even does it himself. I've taught him how. He knows what iMessages are. He knows how to active listen. He even does it for his brother. This kid just took off. And she, at the end of class, she goes, I'm the PTA president. Can you come in and teach this to our whole school? So I've been teaching there for a couple of years. It was pretty, she was
awesome.
sold by that. Yeah. So
that's incredible. So, as we sort of wrap things up, are there other things that you want parents to know about how they parent or the approach they use to parent their children, or even more specifically, some tips or advice around food and eating to sort of ease the struggle if it's there?
First of all, is your own mindset, right? Don't freak out. It's going to be okay. There's steps you can do if there is a problem. Kids' brains are developing until they're 26. They're rewiring all the time. There's lots of flexibility in changing patterns. So if you've been doing it wrong or you feel you've been doing it wrong, I think there is no wrong. There's just always growth. But you can change it. If you don't like what's happening, you can change it and you can work with your kids to change it. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. I have a surprise question for you. What does it mean to you to be nourished?
It's just not food for me. It's to be in touch with what I need and what I want, to have good friendships, and to feel fulfilled. Basically, I'm nourished with health and love and connection. And then that kind of makes me feel like I can do whatever I want.
Kelly, where can parents find you and Respectful Parent in all the work you're doing?
So my website is respectfulparent.com. And then I have a Facebook page that's Respectful Parent. I have several groups on Facebook. One is Respectful Parent for Rye. And then I also have a parent effectiveness training group. But the one where I spend my most time is on outside of Facebook. It's a group on Mighty Networks called GoRespectfulParent.com. And that is a subscription group, but you get 2 weeks free to try it out. It's reasonable, but it enables me to spend a lot of my time and energy answering questions there. So that's where you can find me. And every once in a while, you can find the book clubs that I do on my webpage.
Okay. I'm going to include that link for Go Respectful Parent as well as the other groups on Facebook that you're running, and all those links that you just mentioned. We'll make sure we include those in the show notes.
Okay.
So those of you listening out there, all those links will be posted there so you can contact her or join her groups and learn more about PET and positive interactions and approaches with parenting your child.
Thank you.
Kelly, thank you so very much for coming on The Nourished Child. Well, folks, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Kelly Meyer. I really love the concept of respectful parenting. And there is a book out there called Parent Effectiveness Training. I'll link that up in the show notes as well. You can purchase that one on Amazon. It's a huge help. Again, I also will connect the book Raising Your Spirited Child if you want to check that out as well. If you are interested in those show notes where I have all the links to Kelly's website, her book review club, her monthly based website group, I have all of that in the show notes, the articles, the other podcasts we mentioned. Go to jillcastle.com/097 for those. And don't forget to download my checklist for how to nourish a healthy child. It's a free list of food, feeding, and healthy habits that I believe need to be in place in order to help you raise a well-nourished child inside and out. It's over in the show notes, jillcastle.com/097. And hey, do you like the show? Subscribe, rate, and review it over on iTunes or any Android app you use. When you do so, it really helps other parents be able to find the nourished child. Thanks to all of you who have already taken the time to subscribe, rate, and review the show. I really appreciate it. Up next on The Nourished Child, I'm chatting with Bettina Siegel, author of the new book, Kid Food, and I cannot wait to share this with you. If you're not familiar with Bettina, she is the creator of The Lunch Tray, a popular blog about school food. You, my friends, are in for a healthy treat. As always, thank you for listening. It warms my heart to know that somehow this little podcast is helping you and your family. Be sure to give the child in your life a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.